Hello there everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and we are continuing with Epic History TV's series on the Napoleonic Wars. Last time we checked out the Battle of Eylau, I still don't know how to pronounce it, but either way, yeah, complete fight for survival. It was a disaster on every side, but you know what, Napoleon could still technically claim it was a victory, even though it just felt like everyone was just lucky to be alive by the end of it. And yeah, so this is the Battle of Friedland, which takes place after, the winter, and this is where Napoleon essentially defeats, he wins the battle. This is the fourth coalition, I believe, the conclusion to this. And yeah, Napoleon just wins. So I'll be looking at it. We'll be looking at it in more in depth, and I'll just be constantly pausing to give my thoughts and commentary as I usually do. So if you want to see this video without my little circle here in the corner, or without me constantly pausing to talk or just say stuff, the link to this video will be down in the description down below. And without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Let's watch Napoleon defeats Russia, Friedland 1807.
An Epic History TV History March collaboration, supported by our sponsor Skillshare, home of more than 22,000 online classes. Find out about our exclusive special offer at the end of the video. One week before Christmas 1806, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte arrived in the Polish city of Warsaw, then part of Prussia. A year had passed since his great victory over the Austrians and Russians at Austerlitz, and 2 months since he'd hammered the Prussians at Jena. But Russia still had powerful forces in the field, the most important of which was the Russian First Army, commanded by General Bennigsen. Napoleon would not be master of Europe until it was defeated, and Russia and Prussia forced to make peace. But that winter, Napoleon's first attempt to trap Bennigsen near Pultusk got bogged down in thick Polish mud. The Russians withdrew to Białystok. The French army, half-starved and frozen, was ordered into winter quarters. While in Warsaw, Napoleon began a famous affair with a young Polish noblewoman, Marie Walewska. In the late 18th century, the once mighty Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth had been swallowed up by its neighbours, Russia, Austria, and Prussia.
Yeah, I think she was. Yeah, so wait, let me show you guys something. Yeah, so on my free time I've been watching Napoleon content. There's this series called Napoleon. It's from the year 2002. You can just put in Napoleon 2002. The series is about 4 episodes long, but as you guys can see, I've for the most part have watched it, and yeah, there is a subplot in the series where essentially, the Polish woman Napoleon is having an affair with kind of wants him to restore Poland, as a sovereign, independent power. And I know that's one of the plot points. Though, warning, they kind of make Murad look a little lame in the series. He's constantly messing up and Napoleon's chastising him. Oh no. That's probably the only warning I really have for anyone. Other than that, I really like the series. I especially like the guy who portrays Napoleon. I'm sorry. I just seeing this, I was like, oh yeah, that was a plot point in this series I was watching.
In a series of annexations known as partitions. Until in 1795, a third and final partition wiped Poland off the map. Now, Polish patriots looked to Napoleon as their saviour, praying that his victories against their occupiers would lead to the rebirth of a Polish state. Marie Walewska became Napoleon's mistress in order to further this cause. Ordinary French soldiers, however, had little love for Poland. It was impoverished, freezing, and they missed home. Desertion rates soared. There were even 100 cases of suicide.
Oh my gosh. So, yeah, this is just something all these leaders have to face. Like, when we were watching the Epic History TV series on Alexander the Great, just like, yeah, these great leaders, they put their army through a lot. These soldiers are the unsung heroes of history, right? Like, we'll always be like, yeah, Napoleon, but we don't know the names of, like, the thousands of soldiers who fought to give him, his victories, and that's the tragic thing about, like, these great leaders. Yeah, they're great, but, they also had so many brave soldiers, and it's like, couldn't name one. You could tell me, hey, name one Alexander the Great soldier who fought for him. Or one of his veterans that saw his entire reign. It's like, I couldn't, like, and that's just how war goes, and it's sad, but, these people suffer a lot. They were human, like, you tend to forget that, but they're just human, like the rest of us, and yeah, they go through so much, they miss home. Like, I'm a guy who gets homesick easily, by the way, like, I'm gone from my house for like 2 hours, and I already miss my house, I'm already like, oh, I want to go back, and I can't imagine going to, like, a literal other, nation, country, for months or years of not seeing home, and just going through these awful wartime conditions like Eylau, or marching through the entire Middle East with Alexander the Great. Like, I probably deserve to. Like, I hope that doesn't get me in trouble, but yeah, I would want to just leave too. I'd be like, screw this, man, like, and that's something, like, these guys had to worry about. These leaders like Napoleon and them, just keeping the troops' morale high enough to where they don't turn on you. Because, like, especially, like, back then, like, yeah, with, like, Rome, when we were covering the Rome series and stuff, like, soldiers would just turn on people, like, either abandon or mutiny or stuff. I haven't heard much of that happening in the modern day, at least here in America, but, like, yeah, you're learning about these other nations of the past, like, yeah, it's almost like keeping your soldiers were super, super happy and content was important. Because, yeah, you would almost have to, like, worry about them just, like, deciding not to fight for you one day, or, in the case of the Roman series, literally killing you and usurping your position as emperor, like, yeah, it's, I couldn't even imagine that happening here in the United States. Like, I have never heard of a United States army or group, just saying, now we're not gonna fight anymore, we're just leaving. Like, I can't imagine that. That's, like, so weird to me,
Marshal Ney, command.
Not to say I don't think it's ever happened, but you know what I mean. It's just kind of weird nowadays to hear. If we were to hear something like that, it'd probably shock a lot of us here. I don't know about other countries, though, and the armies run there.
6th Corps sent patrols towards Heilsberg, looking for better quarters. What they found were Russian and Prussian soldiers on the move. They'd stumbled into a surprise winter attack by Bennigsen. Napoleon quickly laid a trap for the Russian army, ordering Ney and Bernadotte to retreat and lure Bennigsen west, while he led the rest of the army north to fall on his flank and rear. But the Russians captured a French courier carrying the Emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte. Bennigsen, now captured a French courier carrying the Emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte.
Yeah, this was I was kind of mentioning, like, I think back in the Austerlitz Battle of Austria, Austerlitz. It's Austerlitz, Edwin. It's not Austria. I'm so sorry, but, I was talking about how much I love the core system and how, like, I really like the system. though, like, yeah, the thing is, it relies a lot of it. Napoleon needed to be really trusting, right? Like, he needed to, like, put people he trusted and were competent enough to lead the corps, because even he couldn't be everywhere. Like, the Battle of Jena really, I think, showcased this. Napoleon doesn't know everything. He's just one dude. And so when he was battling, you know, a bit of the... Not a bit, but, you know, he was battling some of the of the Prussian, like, rearguard, I think they said. The Prussian rearguard, while Davout was on his own battling, you know, the main force of Prussia. And that turned out awesomely, but, like, yeah, the core system still leaves room for individuality, and then having these men have to make calls without Napoleon's, you know, directly telling them. And, like, yeah, I guess with Bernadotte, I don't know fully why he didn't support Davout. I've heard some people say he just didn't want to, or that there was miscommunication. Assuming we go with he just didn't want to, or that he made the call not to. There are situations like that, right? Like, where just independence comes into play, and Napoleon can't fully do a lot about it. And with the core system, Napoleon relied on, like, notes and stuff. And, like, this is what I was kind of talking about in that video. Like, yeah, something I've heard is that, yeah, what if one of the notes were intercepted or something? And I guess this is a situation? Wait, let me listen to that again.
But the Russians captured a French courier carrying the Emperor's orders to Marshal Bernadotte. Bennigsen.
Yeah, see what I mean? Like, yeah, like, the thing is, yeah, the system is genius. I'm not criticizing Napoleon for using it. I love the core system, by the way. It's just like, yeah, like, it wasn't perfect. There were rooms where these marshals didn't have Napoleon's supervision, and they could make calls on their own, and then it's to human error if they make mistakes, right? Like, assuming Bernadotte didn't just choose to not help Davout, just like, yeah, you could make a mistake like that. And even with just passing these notes and, you know, trying to organize and a thing, like, something like that could be intercepted, and then, like, the enemy would kind of have an idea of what you're trying to pull. So it was almost risky in a sense, but it was risky, but, like, it worked really well for Napoleon, and eventually I believe Europe starts implementing it and copying him, because, you know, why not copy the best military mind? Seems like a pretty good idea. But yeah, like, there are these little situations where, yeah, things could fall apart depending on the competence or just the decision making of who's ever in charge of the corps, or just, you know, getting the message to the corps, you know? Like, yeah.
Now warned of the trap, ordered a retreat, fighting a series of rearguard skirmishes against the pursuing French. But he refused to give up the city of Königsberg without a fight, and turned to give battle at Eylau.
Join Planet Fitness during the Big Fitness Energy Sale and save big. Deal ends Friday, February 16th.
The rent is too damn high.
The rent is too damn high.
The rent.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's just kind of summarizing Eylau. It's Eylau, I think. Either way, he's summarizing that because this video came before the Battle of Eylau. Like, he skipped Eylau originally when he was making this series, and he went back to it, so yeah. Yeah.
The Battle of Eylau, fought over 2 days, was one of the most brutal of the Napoleonic Wars, fought in freezing conditions, with neither side backing down. Marshal Augereau's 7th Corps, advancing into the face of a snowstorm, lost its way and was cut to pieces by Russian cannon fire. 5 French Eagles.
Yeah, the Augereau situation was awful. I feel so bad for him. And yeah, the Battle of Eylau, just no one was at their best. But like I said last video, I don't really blame anyone, Napoleon or any of his marshals. Like, there's so many factors as to why they weren't at their best. The troop morale, the troops were exhausted. They were fighting in blizzard, freezing conditions. Like, I understand why Napoleon didn't have a flawless, perfect victory like all the like Jena and Austerlitz. Is just like, yeah, I really think the conditions and just the overall fatigue of this war was just finally catching up to the French, That's why I think Eylau ended up such a massacre, and on paper a Napoleon victory, but it didn't really feel like a victory. It just felt like they barely survived. So, again, it's not, I don't really blame them. I just blame the conditions and just the elements for how things went in that battle.
Were lost. Napoleon's army was only saved by a devastating massed cavalry charge by 10,000 horsemen, led by the fearless Marshal Murat, and remembered as one of the great cavalry charges in history.
Yeah, I guess you could say Murat was the MVP of Eylau, because he really did help stabilize a really bad situation. So yeah.
At Eylau, for the first time as emperor, Napoleon failed to win a clear victory on the battlefield. He and the Russians covered up the true scale of their losses, but both sides are estimated to have lost a third of their armies in the carnage. After the horrors of Eylau, both armies sought time to rest and recover. Meanwhile, the newly formed French 10th Corps under Marshal Lefebvre besieged Danzig, held by 13,000 Prussians under General Kalkreuth. The city came under heavy French bombardment and infantry assault. After 8 weeks, with no prospect of reinforcement, the Prussian garrison surrendered on the 27th of May. Napoleon's northern sea flank was now secure against any possible Russian landing. The French Emperor now commanded an army 190,000 strong, against just 115,000 Russian and Prussian troops. But it was Bennigsen who moved first, launching a surprise attack against Ney's 6th Corps on the 5th of June. Ney conducted a brilliant fighting withdrawal and escaped. Bennigsen, having lost the element of surprise, and with Napoleon advancing, retreated once more. 4 days later at Heilsberg, the French lost 10,000 men in a botched assault against Russian defences. But the Russians continued their retreat the next day. Napoleon thought Bennigsen would head north to Königsberg, but instead he retreated northeast, keeping to the east bank of the Aller River. So when Napoleon's army marched north, it was Marshal Lannes' Reserve Corps on his right flank that next encountered the Russian army, near the...
Dang. Yeah, about Bennigsen, he's been awfully aggressive since, like, we saw him last video. And I don't know if that's good or not. Like, I'm almost like, I don't know, like, in a way, yeah, he's been giving Napoleon quite a fight, and that's good, but he's also been losing, he's also been taking a lot of losses himself, and he does seem to just jump at the chance to fight, so yeah, I'm not sure what to make of him. Like, I'm not sure if my opinion is positive or not. I don't know, like, I don't know how to feel about him so
small
far.
Town of Friedland.
Yeah, I believe Bennigsen, though, a huge issue is that eventually, due to the way he fought, he eventually had the Allo? He's pronouncing it as Allo. The Allo River behind him, which kind of helped, which when he loses this battle resulted in a lot of Russian troops, like, drowning. So I think the only issue, I guess, never have a river or a body of water behind your back unless you have a clear way of escape. Like, that's probably the only thing. Like, fighting with a river behind your back or any, like, you know, body of water is probably never ideal. Even if it looks like you have a chance, I don't know. I never heard of a battle where one army was, you know, had a body of water behind them that went completely well. There might be, I just don't know any. Okay. Ride your horse into the ground if you have to, but tell the Emperor we're fighting the entire Russian army. Marshal Lannes, one of Napoleon's good friends. It's kind of what I know Lannes about. Like, I'm trying to memorize these, you know, marshals as we're going through them. I know Lannes is just one of Napoleon's friends. You know, Murat as, you know, the cavalry dude. Ney, sadly, I only know him mainly because of his charge during Waterloo, which didn't turn out well for him, as you know. That's sadly what I know Ney for. Davoud, the MVP, the best, the GOAT. Yeah, so Augereau, the poor dude who got shot by everyone in you know, Eylau. Just, yeah, that's how I'm trying to remember these guys. I'm just remembering one thing they did, and then I'm just keeping it in my head to better remind
In the late
them.
afternoon of the 13th of June, Russian cavalry scouts informed General Bennigsen that they'd found a single French corps at Friedland. Bennigsen decided he had time to cross the Aller River and smash this isolated corps before the rest of the French army could arrive to save it, and he ordered his army to begin crossing the river. Marshal Lannes, commanding 16,000 men and facing 46,000 Russians, sent an urgent message to Napoleon that he was under attack from the main Russian army. Then he fought a skillful delaying action, hiding the weakness of his force behind a large screen of skirmishers, while gradually yielding ground to the enemy. Lannes was still holding off the Russians as darkness fell. That night, Russian engineers built 3 pontoon bridges at Friedland to speed the movement of troops over the river. But Bennigsen was taking a huge risk. If this turned into a major battle, his army would have to fight with its back to the river, and the steep banks of the Mill Stream dividing its left wing from its right.
Yeah, like I said, even though like I understand why he did this, he probably figured he could crush Lannes and then move. But yeah, I just don't think it's ever a good idea to fight with any river or body of water behind you, you know? Though I could understand why he did it, but like, yeah, just me personally, I would never want to do that. Even if it looks like an easy victory, just like, yeah, the factors of things going wrong, and then be, you know, yeah, I'm just...
Right. Bennigsen had also badly underestimated the speed at which Napoleon's Grande Armée would react. The first French reinforcements arrived that night. The Emperor himself wasn't far behind.
You won't catch the enemy making a mistake like this twice. Yeah, I think even Napoleon agrees with me this isn't the best situation if Bennigsen's to lose, you know, which he does.
By dawn on the 14th of June, about 40,000 Russians had crossed to the west bank of the Aller River. Bennigsen ordered an attack on the village of Heinrichsdorf to turn the French left flank. But French cavalry reinforcements, led by General Grouchy, intercepted the Russians. In more than an hour of charge and countercharge, French horsemen finally drove the Russians back. Marshal Mortier's 8th Corps now arrived to reinforce the French centre. In Sortlac Wood, General Oudinot's elite Grenadier Division fought stubbornly against Prince Bagration's left wing, but was outnumbered by the Russians and gradually pushed back. Around noon on a sweltering day, Napoleon himself arrived. He was soon followed by 1st Corps, commanded by General Victor, standing in for the wounded Marshal Bernadotte, as well as Ney's 6th Corps and the Imperial Guard under Marshal Bessières. The date, the 14th of June, held special significance for Napoleon. It was the 7th anniversary of his great victory over the Austrians at Marengo. A good omen, he declared. The battle then entered a lull, as Napoleon assessed the situation, saw Bennigsen's dangerous position, and issued orders for an attack to take advantage of it. Bennigsen, meanwhile, who was tormented by ill health throughout the day, saw that he now faced the full might of Napoleon's army, and issued orders for a retreat.
When I first heard of ClickUp, I thought of something out of a martial arts movie. But that's a kick-up.
There. This is the objective. Advance, looking neither right nor left. Bore into this thick mass. Cost what it may. Napoleon to Marshal Ney.
But before Bennigsen's retreat could get underway, at 5:30 p.m, 3 salvos from the French guns signalled the start of Napoleon's attack. It was led by Ney's 6th Corps on the right wing, who first cleared Bagration's infantry from Sortlac Wood. But as Ney's troops left the cover of the trees, they came under heavy fire from Russian cannon across the river. As the French attack faltered, Prince Bagration rallied his men and launched a cavalry counterattack. Ney's corps retreated. But now General Victor's 1st Corps came up on his left. Its artillery commander, General Senarmont, advanced with 30 guns and blasted the Russians at point-blank range with case shot. Hundreds of Russians were mown down within minutes. Under this onslaught, Bagration's men began to waver and then retreat. Around 7 p.m, the Russian Imperial Guard launched a desperate counterattack to try to halt the French advance on Friedland. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. As exploding shells began to start fires in Friedland, the French centre and left wing joined the attack. With its only escape route under threat, the entire Russian army began a panicked retreat towards the river.
Yep.
But Friedland's houses and bridges were now ablaze. The town became a deadly trap for the Russians. Many were drowned trying to cross the river, others killed or captured. North of Friedland, some units were able to escape across a ford or along the river bank. But there was no disguising the Russians' terrible defeat.
Yeah,
The Battle of Friedland was one of the most...
Yeah, it's not a good position to be in, you know. Bennigsen blundered by attacking when he did. Yeah, just like... geographically, just not... Yeah, I just... From what, all the river battles I know of, it's never advantageous. Especially when you're the one behind, when the river's behind you, but, you know. Yeah, Bennigsen did blunder with that one.
Decisive victories of Napoleon's career.
Yeah, I think this battle kind of shows, yeah, Eylau was a unique circumstance, and that was mainly due to the conditions. Yeah, because immediately after that's done, Napoleon's back at it with these great decisive victories.
At the cost of 10,000 casualties, he had inflicted twice as many losses on the Russians. About 20,000 men, killed, wounded or taken prisoner. 40% of Bennigsen's army. The Prussians abandoned Königsberg the next day, which was occupied by Soult's 4th Corps, while Bennigsen's shattered army retreated across the river Niemen into Russia. Tsar Alexander's advisors implored him to make peace with Napoleon. He accepted their advice, and a ceasefire was agreed.
Yeah, I think they had the Treaty of Tilsit, right? Where they made out. Okay, I'm just joking, but yeah, there are paintings of them like kissing. Perhaps I was the happiest at Tilsit. I found myself victorious, dictating laws, having emperors and kings pay me court. Yeah, this is quite a thing, because yeah, Napoleon literally did come up from nothing. And yeah, like, essentially became the better of kings and emperors. Like, man, talk about the ultimate rags to riches, right? And then back to rags. But point is, rags to riches story or something.
Alexander and Napoleon met.
Yeah, the life-changing kiss on the lips, man. Oh man, I love that.
For the first time aboard a raft in the middle of the river Niemen, near Tilsit, and developed an immediate rapport.
Yeah,
Tilsit proved to
they got along really well, Alexander and Napoleon, until eventually the continental system kind of broke them apart because, well, there were actually a few things that resulted in their seemingly good relationship falling apart. Obviously the continental system, the invasion of Russia, I believe it was the, what was that, the Warsaw or something, like a confederation? Either way, there was something really close to Russia that apparently also upset Alexander. So yeah, Napoleon, like I said, Napoleon's biggest issue is that he couldn't find a way to make lasting peace with everyone in Europe, and so it always resulted in him having to fight everyone. Sometimes it wasn't his fault, other times he kind of did alienate his allies. Yeah, wait, back of my shoulder here. But yeah, so like, at times it wasn't Napoleon's fault, but there are other times where Napoleon, he really like pushed away any allies he could make by, you know, for instance, Alexander, like I said, I listed the reasons, that's how he ended up pushing Alexander away. Spain, which Spain had been pretty chill with Napoleon until he straight up usurped their king and then invaded them. So, yeah, Napoleon had enemies the entire time, and anytime he could make allies, he usually pushed them away or upset them. So on one hand, it's like it's not completely his fault, and on the other hand, there are instances where he should have probably acted differently, right? Like, it's a bit 50-50. It's not all Napoleon's fault, but yeah, he made mistakes at the same time.
be one of history's great diplomatic summits, as the two emperors feted each other for days, with banquets, parades and concerts, then discussed affairs late into the night. A friendship of sorts developed, while Russia's former ally, King Frederick William of Prussia, was left out in the cold.
Imagine. Yeah, Napoleon and Alexander are like becoming boyfriends and, you know, kissing and making out. Meanwhile, you're there. It's like, what the heck? You know? We were supposed to like fight Napoleon. You were supposed to destroy Napoleon, not join him. Like, oh man, that's hilarious. Yeah, Prussia got humiliated bad. Though they did avenge themselves, when during the War of the Sixth Coalition, where they essentially saved Wellington and helped defeat Napoleon for the final time. So Prussia definitely avenged itself, I feel, at the end. But yeah, this was their wake-up call. And something interesting about Prussia is that they were kind of going off their famed reputation under Frederick the Great, and they got humbled. I feel like something similar like that happened with the French during like World War II. Like, they had a pretty impressive showing during World War I against the Germans, and World War II, I guess they were still kind of coasting off by that. They weren't adapting as fast as Germany did, and then Germany just straight up defeated them, and that's sadly kind of been a meme of France easily giving up during World War II. That's like the big meme. Oh, France always surrenders, but I don't know. I just know. I feel like that's very similar, the situation there.
And it was Prussia who would lose most in the treaties of Tilsit, signed 2 weeks later. 1/3 of Prussian territory was taken away to create the new Kingdom of Westphalia, to be ruled by Napoleon's 22-year-old brother Jerome, and the Duchy of Warsaw, to be ruled by the King of Saxony.
Yes, it was the Duchy of Warsaw. That it was apparently like an insult to the Russians that it was right in their doorstep. That was another issue that created tension between Napoleon and Alexander,
which Polish patriots hoped would prove a stepping stone on the road to their own state. Polish troops were recruited into the Grande Armée, with Polish lancers even forming part of Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard. Russia only had to give up the Ionian Islands, as Alexander accepted an alliance with Napoleon that left the French Emperor master of Europe. Alexander even agreed to join the continental system,
oh boy,
Napoleon's economic blockade of Great Britain, which
one of Napoleon's blunders,
banned British ships and goods from all French-controlled ports. The system had been established the previous winter by Napoleon's Berlin Decree. Napoleon hoped that by cutting off British trade with Europe, he'd cause financial chaos and political upheaval in Britain, allowing him to make a favourable peace. There was just one problem. The continental system didn't work.
Okay, yeah, so I was kind of waiting, but... Wait. Yeah, Napoleon... There are 3 mistakes Napoleon made. These are the big 3 mistakes that usually you always hear about Napoleon, these 3 big blunders. The first is the continental system, which caused a lot of the other 2 mistakes that followed after to happen. But yeah, he couldn't enforce it. And despite attacking the UK economically, the UK could sustain itself. And I believe by increasing trade to other parts of the world. So at the end, all Napoleon did was make his allies and everyone under the system suffer because, him, and it wasn't even easy to enforce, So yeah, this is a big issue and resulting in him and Russia falling out. That's the first blunder. The second is the invasion of Spain. The Peninsula War, which just resulted in so much loss of French, supplies and manpower, and was, a big, overall failure for Napoleon. And the third, and the biggest one, is the invasion of Russia, where he just got decimated. Numerically, at his height of power, because he had, an army of over 600,000 men, he walked out of there with much less of that. Less than 90,000 or 90,000? Complete disaster. those are usually the big three mistakes Napoleon made. And the thing is, with like the continental system, like each mistake I can understand exactly why Napoleon made it. The continental system makes sense in that Napoleon didn't have a way of fighting Britain on land, and any attempt he tried at making, like, you know, a navy was completely decimated by the British, so he just couldn't touch them. And he relied on this to economically fight them. It was an economic war. And like I said, I understand exactly why Napoleon did it. If I were there without the benefit of hindsight knowing what this all leads to, I'd probably agree and be like, yeah, that makes sense, Napoleon. Yeah, hit them in the economy. That'll really get them. But, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, it's like, yeah, Napoleon, this doesn't work. All you do is kind of hurt your allies and kind of ostracize them from you, and it doesn't work, and that's a shame. Though I understand exactly where Napoleon's coming from in this. It's just, I think it caused more trouble than it was worth, quite frankly. Then again, like, yeah, if Napoleon hadn't made the system, he would essentially just kind of have to fight Europe, or at least, yeah, the UK would just constantly be funding coalitions, and Napoleon would most likely have to keep fighting them. But I imagine in this alternate scenario without the continental system, it would mainly just be Prussia and Austria, assuming he could keep friendliness with Russia for a little bit longer. But yeah, essentially, yeah, it would just result in him usually having to probably spend the rest of his reign fighting off Europe. But he probably could have lasted much longer, maybe to the end of his natural life, maybe, you know, that's a big if, but he would have lasted much longer in that regard, at least. But then again, who knows, right?
Not only was it impossible to enforce and undermined by widespread smuggling,
the UK are such trolls during the Napoleonic era. It's like hilarious.
the system damaged French trade just as much as British trade.
Yeah, Napoleon didn't help anyone.
The decisive weapon in this economic war would prove to be the British Royal Navy, which that summer ensured its continued naval dominance by launching a preemptive strike against the neutral Danish fleet at Copenhagen, capturing their warships before they could fall into Napoleon's hands. Royal Navy squadrons blockaded all major French ports, seizing any ships trading with France, while ensuring British merchants could continue to trade overseas in relative safety. The Navy even seized the tiny Danish island of Heligoland as a base for smuggling British goods into Europe. But most disastrously for Napoleon, the continental system would draw him into two conflicts that proved ruinous for his empire.
Yeah, Russia and
The
Spain.
first would be fought in the Iberian Peninsula, where Napoleon decided to force Britain's ally, Portugal, to join the continental system. In November 1807, French troops, supported by their Spanish ally, invaded the country. The Portuguese royal family fled to their colony of Brazil as the French occupied Lisbon without a fight. It looked as though Napoleon had won yet another easy victory. But the Peninsular War was just beginning.
Yep, and yeah, just like you said, Napoleon's great blunder, Spain. Like, you know, like I said, the continental system, like I said, the invasion of Russia and Spain, usually these are the two, among the two biggest issues you hear about Napoleon losing power and control quickly. But yeah, they almost maybe wouldn't have happened without the continental system, or at least maybe things would have played out differently. But yeah, the continental system was really the biggest mistake I think Napoleon made, and trying to enforce that just kind of, all it did was hurt him and his allies. So maybe without it, he probably could have lasted a while longer. But then again, he probably would have made different mistakes. But yeah, I guess I'm just, like I said, looking at it. I think my perspective. I think if he hadn't made that system, he probably could have lasted a long time. Granted, he'd probably have to keep fighting off coalitions the rest of his reign, but he wouldn't have lost the manpower as quickly as he did, having to contend with the Spanish invasion and the disastrous Russian invasion, which just completely crippled him. Like, assuming he just fights wars of defense from then on, without conquest, then yeah, I think he could have lasted much longer. How much longer? Who knows? Maybe optimistically the rest of his life, at least to get an heir and, you know, hopefully raise up that heir, but even then, like, yeah, it's just like, yeah, Napoleon kind of was, like, I guess you could say, always fighting an uphill battle, and his empire couldn't sustain forever, I think. Man, the British, man, they were relentless. They were relentless. But yeah, guys, that was the Battle of Friedland. This was really fun to watch. I will see you all in the beginning of the end with Napoleon's great blunder of Spain. See you all then.